Which questions do you need to consider before going into the SA?
Yeah, I mean, before you go in and sign a service agreement, you need to be clear about your objectives, I would say. You need to be clear about what capabilities and competencies you have internally and what type of contract you want to have. And that is something you need to be clear about before you start negotiating a contract. So one option would be that you go for a long-term full service contract, which probably is, let's say, the easiest way because you leave everything to the turbine supplier, and then price is the only thing more or less that you need to negotiate, and maybe also availability guarantee levels. But it's let's say limited interfaces you would have to the turbine supplier. On the other extreme, you have, if you are let's say a large-scale electric utility, then you have your own service divisions in-house. You may have even some local providers of services that you have for certain areas or for certain markets that you want to use. So what you're targeting is a kind of hybrid approach, combining both qualified services from the turbine supplier, let's say some standard services from independent service providers, or services that are being taken over by your internal service divisions. So, and that requires, of course, much more flexibility from the turbine supplier. And you need to come to an agreement on how to structure and manage this transition phase, taking over from the turbine supplier after warranty period, for example, also availability guarantee. That is, if you're going for a hybrid solution, then probably you won't get an availability guarantee, because the turbine supplier is not in charge of the full service scope. And there are things like that that need to be considered.
Okay. How to negotiate the SA?
Yeah, the SA normally is a contract that initially is provided by the turbine supplier. If you're not in the position that you have your own service agreement that you have already used for other projects, then the probability that you base the service contract on the proposal that is coming from the turbine supplier is very, very high. So, but then the longer, I would say, and this is the rule of thumb, the longer this, in terms of pages, just simply counted, the longer this contract is, the more risk you need to expect on your side, because the turbine suppliers, they learn from their experience with other service contracts, and they put all the failures they have experienced into the contract to get rid of the risk. So it is probably not to avoid to go through the service contract in detail and go through each paragraph to consider who is taking the risk and how much cost is connected to that.
Okay, thank you. If you compare aerospace with wind, what do we lack in our SA and how should it be implemented?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working in aerospace, and aerospace, of course, due to the nature of the product, it's very much quality driven. So security is a very highly evaluated criteria in service. And that actually is also a good benchmark for wind power, because quality standards in service for wind power has not been in proximity of, let's say, what we know from the aerospace industry. The question is, of course, whether it is necessary, but it can at least be a good benchmark to compare with what is possible. High availability numbers, but going away from just a time-based availability, but more to a production-based availability that would require from the turbine supplier not only keeping the turbine up and running, but scheduling also the maintenance time in periods where we have low wind. So that requires more management. Then in addition, for example, what is known from the aerospace industry, there's this kind of power by the hour concept, where you, for example, if you talk about aero engines, that you pay for the hour of operation for your turbine engine, which is, let's say, a concept that is very much related to the operational type, how you run your turbine. So, and there is, I think, things like that you can look at in order to increase quality and service levels also in wind power. And one additional thing is if you compare service levels from independent service providers and turbine suppliers, then there's a clear difference. So independent service provider continuously and have been performing much better than turbine suppliers according to surveys that have been performed in Germany. So in the last year, actually, there was a significant improvement from the OEMs, from the turbine suppliers, but there are still a significant gap. So there's a lot to do on their side.
Thank you, Thilo.